In a recent video, somebody asked me to show Leonard's perks because they were curious as to which ones he'd taken. And I thought about it for a little while and I realised there are probably a lot of people who either have never seen which perks he's taken or have forgotten them. Because I was trying to remember when the last time I leveled up or even spent a perk. And I don't think it happened in Chapter 10. In fact, if there's anyone who knows, who can remember when the last time I leveled up or spent a perk was, I'd be curious to know. So I thought to myself, you know what, let's just show everyone Leonard's build. And I'm going to start with his thieving skills, because of course that is how he started off. I will talk about his, shall we say, warrior skills and his mage skills. Starting with Sneak, obviously he is Sneak 100. This is pretty obvious. He began life as a thief, so to speak. I say began life. This series began with the Thieves Guild, and he has a lot of the usuals, the ones you would expect. Oh, I am using the Ordinator perk mod, which radically changes the perk tree, makes it a lot more interesting. I think it has more options for perks, so you can spend more perks, but I'm not using a mod that increases the number of perks per level. However, Ordinator has a way around that, and I'll show you that in a second. So the usual things, making sneaking easier, making less noise, being able to stab for more backstab damage, because of course that is pretty much the way Leonard solves his problems. He hasn't got all of them though. Oh, I should also mention that throughout the entire series I've been using a mod that makes sneaking a lot harder. It's basically impossible to sneak in broad daylight, no matter how good you are, unless you're using some sort of invisibility. And in the early stages, Leonard really did have to stick to the shadows to remain undetected. He does have Shadow Warrior. This is one where he gets 2 seconds of invisibility when he starts to sneak, but you'll probably notice there's a double set of numbers here. I did some tweaks to Ordinator to prevent Leonard from getting this originally when he was just a thief by making it also require 75 illusion. This is the skill level required to be able to get the invisibility spell. This meant that of course he did not get this ability until he was a reasonably accomplished mage. I thought that made sense, so that's how I tried to do things. There is another special power, Laughing Ghost, that requires Alteration 90, but I've not taken this yet. It's one that lets you teleport and backstab. This might be a little OP, so I haven't decided how I'm going to deal with that. But at the moment, Leonard does not have access to master alteration spells, and he's always been somewhat reluctant to teleport, take portals, etc. He's very nervous about that. He hasn't taken Cloak and Dagger, which when he breaks invisibility with a powered attack, it gives a guaranteed critical strike. And if you're wondering why, considering he's got perks to spare, at least up to Chapter 11, he's really not had to worry about that. If he gets behind an opponent and they're unaware of him, usually it's not a problem for him. So he's not really thought that much about that and is instead focused in other areas. Lockpicking, he's only gone down one. Oh, before I leave here, there are some other skills he could have taken. Things that allow him to outline all humanoids within 150 feet that are detecting him. But he has other options for all of these things. So I sort of diversified his choices a little. Lockpicking's another example of that. You'll see he's really gone down one of the trees, but he did take Game of Fate. This is a perk where there are 5 little chests hidden around Skyrim and Solstheim, and they contain special loot. One of them is a free perk, and thus every time he takes one of these, he gets an extra perk. I think he's got 3 or 4 of them now. So this one perk that he spent has paid dividends. And of course he's taken the ones that help get through locks, because that is so annoying. He hasn't taken any of the special ones. There are quite a lot of interesting perks in the Ordinator perk tree, and I've not taken those. Pickpocket, definitely. This is actually originally one of Leonard's most powerful tools when combined with his alchemy, because he just became better and better at picking pockets, up to the point where he could actually place poisons in someone's pocket and kill them. I'll talk about that in a second. I've ended here on Dragon Horde. This is a very special perk, and I didn't take this until I had 100, but also I was Dragonborn. I decided that that made a bit more sense. This perk makes it so that whenever you sleep with 50,000 or more gold, you can spend that gold to purchase a perk point. Now, you'll already notice that perks are not really a problem for Leonard anyway, because he's been very focused, but he does have a lot of gold. So I think it's about 700,000 in his treasury at the moment. He could actually buy another 14 if he so wished. So although I'm not using a mod that increases the number of perks, the number of perk points per level specifically, I do have options if I want to give him a lot more. Haven't really used that very much. And then of course there's speech. At this point, he's only really spent points in sort of persuasion and being able to sell more, invest with shopkeepers, sell stolen goods to absolutely everyone, and increase the amount of gold all of the merchants have, which is also why he has so much money in his treasury. Believe it or not though, I did check the stats. Over this entire playthrough, Leonard has amassed over 7 million gold. Most of which I believe he's spent on getting items improved and enchanted from the various vendors using another mod called, is it called Honed Metal? So he has spent an inordinate amount of cash. And the 2 other thieves' skills, of course, are light armor. He's invested a little into making himself a little more protected, and also where it weighs nothing so he's not slowed down. Obviously, being able to get the hell out of there has always been a big thing for Leonard. But again, he's not really leaned into it to become a good warrior. And finally, alchemy. This is Leonard's main ability. He doesn't use it as much anymore because he has a lot more alternatives, but this is still, hands down, his most powerful skill. He can make some of the most terrifying and powerful poisons ever known on Tamriel. His favourite poison is one that paralyzes for quite a long time and drains enough health that it will almost certainly kill most enemies. If you can survive a dose of one of his poisons, you are worthy of respect. He has loads of different perks in this tree. Perks that mean that none of his poisons have good side effects and none of his potions have bad side effects. Multiple charges of poison on a weapon so he doesn't have to keep reapplying the poison constantly, which is very useful. Lab Skeever. This is a very situational perk, but it's actually quite powerful. If he uses an alchemy lab, for a short time afterwards, 20 seconds, any potions he drinks will last 15 times longer. This means he can actually get some of his resistant potions, his fortify skill potions, lasting for over 20 minutes. Things like regenerating health, stamina, and magicka, they can last for almost up to 40 minutes if he uses this. Obviously, it requires preparation and forethought. It tends to be something he does when he knows he's going into a dangerous place and he has access to an alchemy bench. That is very situational, but it has been very useful for him. He also makes a lot more potions, and he is basically the ultimate alchemist. He has gone through a massive trial where he poisoned himself so much and yet somehow survived, and has just become the ultimate alchemist and poisoner in probably a long, long time. Mix this with his ability to pick pockets and place a poison onto his enemy and kill them that way. He is extremely deadly if he is not detected. That is absolutely hands down his favourite method of assassination. Simply go up to the victim, slip them a poison, and walk off while they slowly die, paralysed. His warrior skills are lacking. He does have one-handed 100 because he uses a dagger a lot, but all he's got are 2 perks in one-handed mastery just to do a little more damage and more critical damage. So again, he is not terrible with a one-handed weapon, but he's not good. He has some archery ability, but only because he has to use a crossbow or a bow to fight dragons. He has invested nothing into this tree because whilst he does use the crossbow to fight dragons, it's not to do damage with the crossbow, it's to deliver a poison to the dragon. Now, I also added a mod that made dragons extremely poison resistant. So even though Leonard's poisons are absolutely amazing, it still takes him half an hour to kill a dragon, and it's still a terrifying experience. Two-handed, he's never used. Block, occasionally he used a torch to block, even once or twice a shield, and he does use wards on occasion. And I'm using a mod that treats wards as a blocking device as well, but as you can see, never really used and no focus into it. Heavy armor. He has actually put 1 perk into heavy armor because he does wear 1 piece. That is the ebony mail, which you can see here. It is actually heavy armor, but it's very much a stealth piece. It allows you to move quietly, and it makes you a sort of a shadow. I'll actually show you that in case you've never seen it. And it will poison nearby enemies. So he has invested a little into heavy armor, although not much. And because of the way Ordinator works, he requires 2 heavy pieces to actually get better at heavy armor, and that rarely ever happens. Smithing. He's actually invested a little into this, but it was more or less purely so that he could forge dwarven things, he could smelt dwarven metal, because it was required for one of the museum quests when he was making the planetarium. There are other reasons he's thinking of becoming a better smith, but I won't spoil it because it is something to do with chapter 11. But generally speaking, Leonard is against the concept of manual labour. So this is too much like hot, heavy, sweaty work for him. So he always uses his money to get somebody else to improve his weapons and his armour. Again, that's probably where about 6 million gold has gone. That's through the honed metal mod. Moving on to magic, which was the last area that Leonard started to dabble in. And in fact, in the early chapters, Leonard was very nervous of trying any magic. He lacked any ability, he found it a little intimidating, and he shied away from it for quite some time. In fact, the 4th chapter was the College of Winterhold chapter, and by the end of that chapter, he became the Archmage and was still a fairly bad wizard. However, he'd sort of gotten used to certain useful spells. Spells like clairvoyance. He started to use a spell that would create a magical umbrella above him to keep the rain off him so he wouldn't get wet. Very Leonard type spells. where most people wouldn't think of that sort of spell for a wizard. They'd want fireballs. Leonard doesn't want fire coming out of his hand. He doesn't want to summon zombies. That's squishy. But a spell that keeps the rain off him, he's all for that. And over time, he actually became, well, a master of illusion. And that really shouldn't be too big of a surprise. Not just because of things like muffle and invisibility, but because Leonard is obsessed with manipulating people. And illusion has spells like calm, fear, and rage. This appealed to Leonard a lot. If we look at the perks he's taken, there's the obvious illusion mastery, night eye that gives him night vision whenever he wants. That was actually very convenient. He did have night vision because he's an alchemist and could make night vision potions, but this just made it a little easier. He radiates an aura of mystical charisma that touches all within 40 feet, making any illusion spells he casts affect them more, 25% more powerful or last 30% longer. Also, whilst invisible, and at this point, when he took this, he was still using potions of invisibility more than the spell. In fact, I don't think he had the spell when he first took this because it requires 70, and invisibility is a skill 75 spell if memory serves. But whilst invisible, he would take less damage if he was being attacked, and he would sneak better. Things like that. This really works well with Leonard's mode of operation. But things like Dream Thief were where the real power for Leonard come in. This is the sort of thing that Leonard dreams of. Being able to go up to a sleeping victim and drain their dreams and even begin to make them friendly to him. He can actually dream charm them. Activate sleeping victims to project yourself into their dream, improving their disposition towards you. High disposition may earn you quests, discounts, and gifts. Chance to fail and alert the victim based on illusion skill. So as you can see, he's really invested in that, being able to make people like him. And obviously, perks that make illusion better. You may also have noticed alteration is another one he's mastered. Again, it has a lot of spells that, well, Leonard finds useful. It's got spells that, like telekinesis, it's got a spell that makes you tougher, and quite importantly for Leonard, makes you warmer. Believe it or not, there's an alteration spell that makes you warmer. But mostly it's things like Mage Light, Candlelight, that sort of thing. Really, really useful spells that don't make you more powerful, but make your life a little easier. Of course, eventually this led to Leonard getting paralyzed. That has become a big thing for Leonard. His perks are the ones you might expect. Alteration Mastery. There's a perk that puts 5 shrines in Skyrim, and each one of them will improve 1 school of magic. I believe Leonard's found 3 of them so far. I think he's found Alteration Illusion plus 1 other. I'll have to check up on that. It's been a while. He's got perks that give him more resistances, because this was a big thing in the early days of Leonard, trying to resist being on fire. He now has gear, potions, etc. that just make him really, not invulnerable, but close to invulnerable. But this is still a big part of why he is so hard to kill with those things now. Back in the day, he wasn't. And what else? I think that was... Yeah, novice and apprentice spells of any school cost 100% less magicka to cast. This means that the light spells, he can just keep casting and casting, and they never take magicka, which again, it's very convenient. He does have some minor ability in conjuration, destruction, and restoration. He doesn't use destruction very often, to be honest, and has invested nothing into it. Restoration, he's used a little. There are some useful spells there. He's used wards, he's used healing, usually on Inigo, and he is investing into it, as you can see. He also unlocked Spirit Tutors. 2 Spirit Tutors roam Skyrim. Find them and speak with them to receive a permanent blessing that makes restoration spells 1% stronger per 20 points of magicka. Each Spirit Tutor grants 1 blessing. I believe he's found both of them. I'd need to check on that. There are some other perks here I believe Leonard might get interested in as he gets better at restoration. Conjuration is the interesting one. He has invested 1 point into Conjuration Mastery at the moment, but the reason he's interested in Conjuration is not the usual thing. He doesn't want to summon, like, zombies or Dremora, that type of thing. The Conjuration spells he's most interested in are the ones that summon things like the chest that keeps all his loot, or a spell that gives him a place to stay, that keeps him warm, keeps the rain out. These magical, I can't remember what it was, it was like summon a camp, a magical camp. And he's really wanting to work towards the master level Conjuration, because one of the master spells he really wants to be able to cast will allow him to conjure a sort of magical bubble where he can go into the bubble, be protected from all of the elements, and he'll have a bed, and he'll have all of the usual crafting stations, things like an alchemy bench, which would work really well with his perk. So he wants to get better at Conjuration, but he really doesn't like the Conjuration spells, so this one's very slow going. On the subject of these 3, one of the things that I should note is that Leonard cannot cast illusion spells on the Dwarven Constructs, on Undead, or on... I can't remember what the other one was. There is a perk that lets you do that. Master of the Mind. This is the perk that lets your illusion spells work on Undead, Daedra, and Automatons. It does require 90 illusion, but I felt this was extremely powerful, and it removed some of the enemies that Leonard would still fear. Enemies that are not affected by his poisons, for example. So I didn't like the idea of him getting this, so I tweaked it so that it also required 50 restoration, so that you were an adept at controlling undead, 50 conjuration, so that you were an adept at summoned creatures like Daedra, and 50 enchanting, so that you were somewhat familiar with soul gems, and this would give you a reason to be able to control automatons. That was my thinking. Basically, this would prevent Leonard from getting this until he was so powerful in these individual areas that honestly it didn't matter if he used an illusion to, frighten the undead, or a turning spell to frighten them, etc, etc. Now, he has slowly but surely been crawling towards that point. He's now 47 Conjuration, 45 Restoration, and he is already 85 Enchanting. His enchanting skill improved partly because he was working with Neloth, if my memory serves me right, but he has actually put this ability to good use and has created some very good gear for himself. His gear has a lot of resistances, which means he doesn't have to worry about potions so much. And this is good, but I'm actually thinking of changing his gear as well due to, the chapter I'm in right now is focusing quite a lot on shouts, but that's for a totally new time. So the perks for enchanting are pretty much the ones you expect, being able to put 2 enchantments, etc, etc. They make enchantments more powerful. And that's it for his perks. As you can see, he's still very much a stealth character, but he is now a somewhat magical stealth character. People would tend to say things like, well, he's a spell blade. Yeah, except he doesn't really like using blades if possible, so you might call him a spell poisoner, a spell alchemist, if you will. But yeah, he tends to focus on not getting hit, not getting seen, and trying to deal with his problems either by getting someone else to do it or by using the least dangerous and, well, any method that doesn't involve body fluids leaking onto him. Again, this is why one of his favourite methods of killing is to just use a poison that paralyzes someone and quickly kills them off. You know, paralyzed people, they're probably not going to leak fluids or anything like that because they're all clenched up, yeah? That's a nice thing to think about, isn't it? Now, Leonard did not unlock shouts until chapter 5 of this series. So the early chapters, no shouts whatsoever. But even once he unlocked shouts, he was reluctant to use that ability, partly because it made him a little nervous, but also he believed that this would draw the attention of dragons to him, and this was something he wanted to avoid. He did use Whirlwind Sprint on occasion to avoid danger, especially once he'd already got the attention of a dragon. This was one of his go-to moves. And beyond that, he didn't actually use shouts at all. Clear skies he did not want to use because, yes, there's a bunch of clouds there, but there might be a dragon up there. So he never used it. He only started using that, I think it was at chapter 10, once he got Bend Will, because Bend Will is the shout that lets him control dragons, and so suddenly he was no longer nervous, and this was at the end of chapter 9. The only other shout he used, shall we say, enough that you would notice, was Summon Durnavir. This he got in chapter 7, I think that's when I did Dawnstar. This was a bit of a game changer for him. Obviously he could summon an undead dragon that would help him out. He tended to use that if he was going to fight a dragon. In fact, this is how he managed to pluck up the courage to go forth with the Museum of the Dragonborn quest line that required him to kill 2 dragons. So he did use this one, but again, even after getting Bend Will, he still didn't make a lot of use of shouts. As you can see, he's got a lot of shouts ready to learn, and he also has a bunch of dragon souls. The thing is, the way the story unfolded, Leonard doesn't want to go back to the Greybeards, who are the teachers. And I've generally played this game as though when learning a new skill, Leonard would seek out a teacher. So when learning a new spell, he would learn it at the College of Winterhold. I actually have a mod that requires you to read the book several times, and then he would test it out in the college where there were people to help him out. I sort of did it like that. I did the same with perks, and so my thought was, I'm not going to try any of these unless I have a teacher. So summon Durnavir. Durnavir himself teaches you this. Bend Will, he had to experiment with that one. It's just how it went. So overall, this has been an underutilized side of Leonard. That could possibly change with chapter 11. And finally, Leonard's gear is actually pretty damned good. He's got ebony mail, and he has a bunch of things that he has, well, enchanted himself, and they tend to be things that grant resistances to disease, shock, poison, fire, you name it. His boots negate all falling damage and grant resistance to fire. Inigo has the same boots, so they can both fall from a great height. He still tries to avoid doing that because it is extremely nerve-wracking for him, and also it's not the sort of thing a gentleman does. The gentleman uses a set of stairs, of course. I mean, and so on and so forth. Generally speaking, it's things that will make his potions last longer or will protect him. Whilst he has used a number of weapons in the Let's Play, they've all been one-handed weapons, relatively slender. He has leaned on the Blade of Woe for the longest time. It's a nice dagger that absorbs a little health when he stabs, but it's mostly a way to deliver his poisons. So this is the blade he keeps poisoned. He has another blade, Merun's Razor, and he doesn't poison that. He uses that against enemies that cannot be poisoned. So he just switches between the two, so he doesn't waste poisons. Also, Mehrunes Razor does have a small chance to instantly kill. And of course, he does have a variety of poisons for different scenarios, including poisons that will just paralyze but not kill. But his main go-to poison is one that paralyzes for a long time. Again, he is a superb poisoner and will actually drain the enemy of health and keep doing so for quite some time. He has a bunch of fortify potions that will boost all sorts of things, and as you can see, they boost a lot. He can make his illusion spells like over, well, 239% stronger, so that's 339, over 3 times as powerful as his normal illusions are. Obviously, they don't last for very long unless he has just used the alchemy table. So that's where that one comes in. So generally, if the going gets tough, he starts, well, chugging potions. He juices up. Yes, he does. But it doesn't matter because he's such a good alchemist. None of his poisons and potions are addictive. Well, the poisons obviously are not addictive. Be a little bit worrying if they were. Although, you know what? Now that I've said that out loud, I'd imagine Leonard would utterly adore it if he could get someone addicted to a mild poison that kept them weak and pliable. But that's pretty much Leonard in a nutshell, really.